Olá, sejam todos muito bem-vindos ao Capital Insights, uma parceria do CNN Money com a Broadcast. Eu sou o Vitor Irajá, âncora aqui do CNN Money, e ao meu lado está Carla Espotorno, editora da Broadcast. E hoje a gente tem o prazer de receber Christopher Pissarides, Prêmio Nobel de Economia de 2010, professor da London School of Economics e uma das maiores referências mundiais em mercado de trabalho e políticas de emprego.
Ao longo de sua carreira, Pissarides se destacou por estudar os impactos do desemprego, da automação e das mudanças tecnológicas sobre a economia e o mundo do trabalho. Professor, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and welcome to Capital Insights.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Well, I would like to begin talking about work week. Right now in Brazil, we have a heated debate that regarding work week because our Congress just approved a reduction from 6 to 5 days the work week. I'd like to ask you which are the risks of this change and also the benefits, and if you think that this change could force a gain of productivity in Brazil.
Yes, well, these are, of course, as you realize, are complicated questions because different countries have different experiences, and whether they do one thing or the other, it also depends on many other things that characterize the country and other things related to do with economic policy. But let me tell you one thing, though, before we get into the details. If you look at the big picture of hours of work overall, there's no doubt that they've been falling and they will continue to be falling. You know, if you look back 100 years ago, people were working 60 hours a week. Then 25 years ago, maybe the 60 became 45, then the 45 became 40. So we are on this downward trend. So if you talk generally, how could we possibly think that the 6 hours that many workers are working now will become, sorry, the 6 days will become 5? That doesn't surprise me at all. It will become 5, whether you like it or not. Or let me put it differently, hours of work will be compatible with 5 days a week, you know, which would be, say, 38 to 40 hours. Of course, you don't have to take the hours reduction as fewer hours, fewer days during a week. You could take it differently. But anyway, that's what we're observing. So now the question is, how do you do it? That's a very sensitive issue because in many countries where we had these reductions, the businesses first reduced hours themselves, and then it was enacted, and then it was put into legislation so that we know how to regulate it and make sure that it's not abused. And all those. There is an exception that I know well because of where I live is in France. France, a few years ago, reduced weekly hours of work. I think it was something like from 40 to 37, and there were different kinds of discussions, very similar to what I hear now,
From 6
what I
to
was
5.
told, that what it's going to do and all that. In the French case, if I remember correctly, because I must say only from memory, because I wasn't aware that it was a hot issue here to remind myself, but I was involved in some way in understanding and explaining and all that. The productivity, hourly productivity has increased. You see, because people are more productive in the beginning. You know, if you work 50 hours, say, you're much more productive in the first 30, then in the 40, then less in the 50. So if you cut off the tail, then you naturally become more productive. But there is also the incentive. You know, you say, oh, now I have fewer hours to do my work, and then I'm going to have a lot of more time than I used to relax and spend it with my family and so on. And that increases productivity. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if I see increases in productivity when hours are reduced. But one final thing, it's although government has a role to play in regulating legislation to suit the workers, I don't think the best way of doing it is by government saying, okay, from now on, you have these hours and now you're going to have these hours here. I think it's a gradual process. It's a process following consultation. You talk both to business leaders and to their workers. From the workers' point of view, they like it, and I think it's justified to be liked, because I think work should be an enjoyable activity in addition to earning an income to give you a standard of living. In other words, there should be well-being at work, not just work as a source of earning income. And we know from many studies done in labor economics and surveys of workers that part of well-being is fewer and especially more flexible hours of work. A company that respects that a worker, whether male or female, will have need for flexibility. Sometimes there might be children who are sick and they need attention, and the worker should be allowed, without penalty, to spend at home, sometimes take care of family holidays, respecting the time off, because one of the problems we have now with the means of communication we have is that workers complain a lot that they are very often required, or if not required, expected to work in unsociable hours. If your boss might suddenly have nothing to do on a Saturday evening and sits there working on the laptop and say, oh, let me ask such and such about this, and firing off an email and then maybe sending an SMS that thinks perhaps will see your email, and the employee feels bad. Workers don't like that kind of thing. They like flexibility, they like respect of their private
It's even
time.
in Saturday, yes, and they want to be with their families, etc.
So all those things have to be taken into account when you're talking about hours of work.
But Professor, we are discussing here in Brazil legislation change that implies that working 6 days a week, for example, is forbidden. And we are discussing that in a constitutional matter. You said maybe government shouldn't imply that the working should be like this or like that. But I'd like to understand how to engage this discussion without government taking the front of it. And there are lots of specificities that plenty of sectors, for example, are going to have to adapt themselves to this new schedule, the new shift. I'd like to understand how could be all of these sectors, listened to and give this contribution, for example, to this discussion, and of course the impact be mitigated.
Well, it should be enacted after government consults all these sectors, the one that will be most affected, both workers' representatives, so their unions, and managers, either individually for managers of big companies or through a confederation of industry, and see how it will affect it, and then bring it in. Now, I'm in favor of government not allowing companies to work as it were, forced work on their workers.
6-day shift, for example.
If it's for many hours that bring hardships, if you work, for example, 7 days a week or 50 hours a week, those should not be allowed, because we know that in modern times, with the capital we have, with the technologies they have, you can be very productive with fewer hours. Now, to to say that a company should not be allowed to work 6 days, I don't think there is justification for that with current circumstances. It's not something that a worker will say, "My God, I'm stuck. My employer wants 6, and if I don't work 6 days a week, then I'm going to be unemployed." Some companies will work 6 days. You know, restaurants, for example, need to work
of course
6 days. Otherwise, they lose business. Are restaurants going to be forced to work 5 days a week? I doubt it. The whole of the hospitality sector, which is a very big sector, the whole of health and care, usually you might have them working 6 days, but maybe not each day full-time work. There are many, very flexible ways you're doing it. To be absolute on one thing, that it should be 5 days and not 6, and not taking into account what you do during those days, I think it's a little bit too inflexible, and you won't benefit anyone very much.
Well, in this discussion, in this debate that we have right now in Brazil about the work week, some legislators defend that the negotiations about the shifts and how many hours and also the conditions of work should be individual from the with the employee and the employer,
Yes.
and not with a union or collectively. What's your opinion about that, and what the international experience say about these individual negotiations?
It's I don't think we're ready actually to go for individual negotiations, because workers will always be at a disadvantage. I mean, the employer is a big company. Some are very big, some are even smaller. They have more than one worker. They are talking more from a position of power. Usually they are better educated, they are more sophisticated, they are more confident. They, in a sense, they hold the strings in that they claim they give you the job, although strictly speaking the job is a union of an employer with an employee. They pay you, as it were. They take care of the final product and how they sell it to the market. They are more powerful.
But even in the senior positions, for example, a senior analyst or a medium manager, in these positions, you also think that it would be not good for the employees if they could decide and make an individual negotiation. I'm not telling about the C-levels, just the medium.
No, for those I agree. More senior employees, you could have individual negotiation, and in many countries you do. In countries like the United States, Britain, you do have at the senior level individual negotiations. I was talking about the large number of workers who work, say, manufacturing plants or in a very big service provider. They need to be represented by unions who are hopefully professionally training how to negotiate and how far to push for more or less. But senior employees, I agree, the private negotiation, especially if it's a large economy, large country, like you have here, that there are alternatives, there is competition. Yes, that by the way, does require free competition between companies as well. Not big monopolies and have them negotiate individually on a big economy, because then on a big monopoly, because then you're stuck.
Professor, there are plenty of economists and these associations that, of course, defend some sectors' interests. That they say that the end of the 6-by-1 shift in Brazil, it will impact the GDP growth and inflation rate that is actually very high nowadays. Although we have an interest rate that's also high, I would like to understand the impacts of this. Changing the shift by law doesn't imply that we have lots of impacts on GDP growth, on inflation, and eventually the interest rate here in Brazil?
No, I mean, those things, you can describe scenarios where they happen, but they require so many conditions that whether they actually happen in an economy, it's very unlikely that you're going to see all these things in one go. Reducing our days from 6 to 5 is not a major catastrophe in the economy that will cause a recession, inflation, and so forth. You know, for a start, you should expect some change in productivity. If productivity did not change at all, and if you paid everyone exactly the same as before, but now they work less, and if companies did not make excess profit before, if markets are not very competitive, then okay, you might get some price increases, and it will not be inflation. It will be a once and for all price increase in the sectors that work 6 hours and they're now forced to work 5. Are these conditions satisfied? In my view, no. There's no economy that satisfies all these conditions. If productivity goes up when you reduce your hours of work, then that offsets the price increase. The price doesn't rise because you become more productive. If before the market for that sector was not very competitive, and therefore profits were not down at the lowest bearable level, then again, you know, you could get a hit on profits, and that will encourage the firm to make more investments, take on new technology that will avoid any price increase and any hit on their profits. There are so many different conditions that's why I was saying it's not something that you should be doing suddenly, do it and it's the end. It's something that it needs research. You need to study all these things. You need to say what's the likely impact. And it's very likely that you'll get it wrong as well. You know, these are statistical properties. You say it's half probabilities, this will happen or that will happen or the other. But these kind of panicky, told doomsday scenarios from that, they're just it's politics, not economics.
We also are discussing in Brazil the possibility of the workers have not a fixed condition contract, fixed terms conditions in the contract, like 5 days work week with 40 hours, but that the workers would be paid by hour. Do you think that this model is a model that can work in any kind of sector, in any kind of markets, economies like Brazil?
I don't like that very much, actually, the hourly, because you end up with 0-hour contracts where an employer might say, if I don't have work today, I'm not going to call you into work and I'm not going to pay you anything. It shifts the risk of business fluctuations onto the worker entirely, which is not right.
But
the worker is not making decisions that affect the performance of the company.
But it gives flexibility to the company, yeah?
Sorry,
it gives flexibility to the company.
Yeah, but it gives flexibility to the company by shifting the risk to the worker.
Yeah.
Well, it's the company that should take the risks of their own decisions in their own market environment. The worker goes there and does the work that the company requires them to do. If they don't do it well, fair enough, don't pay them. But if they do it well and then suddenly the company says, no, next week I'm going to have a lot of work for you, but this week I don't, so I'm not going to pay you this week and I'll pay you for the work you do next week, then the worker bears all the risk of business fluctuation. And that shouldn't be the case. I mean, the workers have fewer financial assets. They don't have a buffer stock of savings, most of them, to take these fluctuations. And they shouldn't be encouraged, the company shouldn't be encouraged to shift.
And he's not a partner of the company. He has not partnership.
And they're not ones that make decisions at the level of the board of the company. And and therefore they should bear the consequences.
So we have services inflation, the most stubborn weight on CPI, for example, in the United States. Here in Brazil, we have a similar scenario. I'd like to understand this impact of changing for the work shift, for example, but not just that. For example, here in Brazil, recently, we had lots of programs that established the ingress of people in university, for example, and that made the cost, for example, of some services like electricians or plumbers, for example, to rise. There is a space for the market to adapt itself with plenty of people in the university, for example, and lacking workers for this kind of service, for example.
Again, if you look at the trends in economies, or the kind of economy that we have, both in Brazil and North America and Europe, the Western type of free market economy, the trend is for service, what you call service inflation. I wouldn't call it service inflation. I would say increasing the price of services, because the rate of productivity growth in the service sector is always less than what it is in other sectors of the economy, including agriculture, the production of food. There'll be huge productivity gains, manufacturing, especially, and some service sectors, but the majority of service sectors don't gain productivity in the way other sectors do. And those that gain the productivity pull up pay. They can afford to pay their workers more. And therefore, if you're going to attract workers into the service sectors that haven't had productivity gains, you have to put prices up. Otherwise, the sector will stop producing. So you need to be prepared for that. Now, that doesn't mean that every single price increase in the service sector is due to the productivity differential between services and manufacturing, say. I'd say that the trend over long periods of time is due to that. But it could be other factors. Again, it's something that you need to study. Economics, unfortunately, is not an easy subject.
Professor,
we need to study a lot.
I'd like to talk more deeply about this matter of productivity, but now I have to call a break here in Capital Insights. A gente faz agora uma rápida pausa aqui no Capital Insights e volta em instantes, não sai daí. Estamos de volta com o Capital Insights e hoje a gente recebe Christopher Pissarides, Prêmio Nobel de Economia de 2010, professor da London School of Economics e uma das maiores referências mundiais em mercado de trabalho e políticas de emprego.
So, Professor, your research about the frictions in the labor market, I'd like to ask you about the influence of AI in the labor market and perhaps reducing these frictions. And how do you see if what AI could do for the labor market, creating more unemployment, or perhaps generating new and better job and opportunities?
It could do all of these things depending on how we handle it, because so far AI is under human control. We direct it in the way we want. And of course, I would strongly support ways, and it's easy to see how it can be done with AI taking on boring, heavy tasks within a job and leave the more creative and more interesting work to humans. If you do that, then productivity will go up, because human capital, workers' brains, in other words, will be directed to discovering new ways of doing things, new ways of using AI that will enhance productivity. Unfortunately, I believe, and the more I think about it, I strongly believe that the frictions we have now with AI are worse and more difficult to overcome than the frictions that I studied 40 years ago in the labor market that produced unemployment, which involved mainly the skill of the worker and the structural changes taking place in the economy. And the reason I say that is that there is a lot more uncertainty about where AI is going. And the creators of AI technologies, the high-tech people, are giving confusing signals. Some of them are saying AI will destroy us where it's going. Others are saying AI is giving a chance to the big digital companies to take advantage of all of us and exploit us. Others are saying AI will take our jobs, although there's no evidence for that yet at all. Others are saying you will not be able to do a job unless you learn programming, which is complete nonsense as well. And it just goes on and on. So if you're a worker and know your employer is thinking about AI and is talking and has an AI office now and they're specialists and talking to them about developing AI for your work, then you start thinking, what could they be saying? Because are they trying to find ways of replacing me at work? Are they trying to find ways to take all the boring stuff that I have to do and therefore I become more creative? Are they thinking of changing altogether the way they do their work? And unless you have an employer that is forward-looking and open to discussion and discusses with their employees what they're doing and how it will impact them and get their views, you will create even more confusion, which is a kind of friction in the operations of the company.
But Professor, the AI could change the job demand. For example, actually some activities that were made by human, they are fully automated, for example.
Yeah.
I'd like to understand, how does AI change the demand of job, thinking about, for example, intellectual jobs that may be just vanished,
Well, electricity changed the many things that humans were doing before. It took them over. Their car replaced. There were thousands and thousands of horse keepers in the major cities.
And what's the future of jobs? Of these jobs?
I think New York City has something like 300,000 horse keepers in 1910, and by 1930 had 30,000. What happened to those 270,000? Because of the work of one man, Ford.
Mr. Ford.
Yes, exactly. So it's not new. Yes, of course AI will take many jobs. We'll take the jobs of translators, for example. We're not going to need translators. Like, what's the point of paying someone to translate a book when you can just create a PDF, give it to AI, and you get an instant translation out of it? What are the jobs will go? Maybe drivers. We are going to need
Journalists.
fewer drivers. Journalists, yes. Go lawyers, because the large language models will do a lot of the work that lawyers do, so we're going to need fewer lawyers. It would change the structure of work, the employability. I mean, AI has already got rid of all the, what the Americans call the bank teller. In Britain, we call them bank cashiers, because they've been replaced by ATMs. But not all of them have lost their jobs. Some have lost them as suggested. They became relationship managers, which improves the quality of service that the bank offers to you. There are all these things changing all the time. I don't think there is evidence that AI will take more jobs and they will not be replaced than what electricity or the motor car did.
So we cannot forecast that the unemployment rates will increase much, much higher than in other age, the age of the auto, the age of electricity.
No, you cannot forecast it because, as we said before, economics is a difficult subject.
Yes.
You don't just throw numbers in there. But I can guarantee you it will not create mass unemployment. There will be no...
That's very nice to hear, Professor.
Because the human is in control. If we, like we had mass unemployment in the past, in the 1930s most infamously, I should say, and again later. But that's because we got some things terribly wrong. We got things terribly wrong with the financial crisis, and that created debt crisis, and therefore high unemployment. That could do it. We could conceivably get things horribly wrong with AI, but hopefully we're a little bit more intelligent now than we used to be in the 1930s or maybe in the 80s when they just opened financial markets as if it was the greatest thing since white sliced bread or something, and things went wrong. I think now we're a lot more careful.
You are more in control, yes. You said something, Professor, about teaching, including the workers, how to program, how to make a prompt. Do you think that in some sectors, like the lawyers or even the journalists or the professors, the teachers, the education, it will be essential, fundamental to learn how to prompt, to program, to deal better with these digital systems?
I don't think programming is going to save you in any way because AI is much better at programming than people. I think what they need to know is how to work with AI, how to deal, and especially how to understand data and what does it mean, how to communicate what you learn from AI to the customer and to the colleague, and to use it as knowledge that you build up a successful company. Those are the skills that you need. You need skills. You need a much broader range of skills than what you had before. You need to understand some statistics, some mathematics, language, communication, language, personal relationship, because it's the service economy that will be expanding. In the service economy, you have a lot of personal relationships. Those are the things that will always be in human hands, and we should always be trying and use that, not try and copy the things that AI does, because AI will do them better than you.
And Professor, if we look to the qualified, the overqualified professionals, like, for example, those with college degrees, for example, last year, only 30% of graduates find jobs in their field. And I would like to understand how unfixing this problem can be solved with AI, for example, taking these roles, for example, of overqualified employees, for example.
The problem, actually, if you'd allow me to say, is not overqualification. The only market that we know now has been affected by AI is the market for new entrants into the professions, who enter as assistants to more senior lawyers or accountants or public servants, which are jobs that the senior people themselves can do now using ChatGPT or one of the other large language models. Now all the major, there are several.
Yeah.
That's the only market that's been affected. That's why I said we're going to need fewer lawyers. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that the fact that 5 years ago we had X thousand people becoming paralegals to help senior lawyers, and now we have X divided by 2 or divided by 5 or whatever to help them. It doesn't mean that we're worse off we might even be better off. Those who started, though, to do that job and specialized in it, they're obviously confronting some difficulties. And that's why I said you shouldn't specialize in your studies now a lot and expect to get a job in exactly what you specialized in.
Maybe
Be
harder,
more open.
but maybe harder for that intern, for example, to access the market labor, no?
It's harder in the beginning. You could have a little bit of retraining. You could see what other jobs are available, and you're going to get the job. I guarantee you, if you want a job, you're going to get one. You're not going to sit idle. It might take you a bit longer. Understandably, you'll be worried about it, but be confident. And of course, here government needs to come in and support them in the transition, because it's not their fault that they're finding it more difficult.
And how to do it? The United States, for example, are trying to, here in Brazil, our Congress also discusses about a regulation or regulation. I'd like to understand how government can protect jobs, for example.
Government shouldn't protect jobs. Jobs are determining the market. What government should do is to protect the person, the individual, in their job search, first of all, by giving financial support to maintain the standard of living that is appropriate for someone who spent so long training to become a professional, giving full information about what professions are expanding, what are contracting because of AI. And if they haven't had training on how to work with AI, to provide subsidized training programs on how to work with AI so that they can enter a profession later. What government should never do, because it would be very bad for the economy and the individuals, is to try and stop companies from closing down jobs or not opening jobs that are no longer as profitable and as efficient in producing their output as AI is.
Professor, you mentioned the soft skills, and
Yes.
I'd like to ask you about which business models or even industries would be more prepared to live in this area, when the soft skills will be more valuable, considering that this AI age will just live more. And you say that empathy, creativity are skills that will be more and more valuable in the future, yes?
Well, soft skills will be more valuable. There are especially two sectors that will have more and more demand, which is the health and care sector, because we have aging populations, and because there is expectation of good quality service provision to older people who are sick, but also childcare. Actually, I would include in the care sector. And hospitality, with restaurants, hotels, and entertainment generally, because we're working fewer and fewer hours, and we had a discussion on that, and in the free time, people will want to do activities that are within the hospitality industry that would be on the whole unaffected by AI, because you might have teenage children who sit in front of their laptops and or their tablets, and they go on and on playing their free time. But this is not what people would generally do with their free time.
Nanny GPT.
So they need to be better paid, or they need to be maintained, because they are not going to become more productive, whether you like it or not. And therefore, the price of the service they're providing needs to rise. And the way that will be paid for will be through higher productivity elsewhere in the economy. If there is no higher productivity elsewhere in the economy, then there would be no extra income to spend on these services, so demand would be less, so the two go together. Generally, we would all be better off if there is higher productivity in the economy elsewhere, like in manufacturing and in some of the service sectors, like these tech service sectors. And then that income spent on the services I mentioned, because those will improve the welfare of the people, of both those going to entertain themselves in the hospitality industry, or those go to get care if they're sick or old or have children that need them to be looked after. And they will be prepared to pay more for it because they will gain from the productivity gains elsewhere.
Professor, I would love to conversate for hours and hours with you, but unfortunately, our time here is short. I'd like to thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Discussion,
you,
very interesting discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
E assim a gente encerra essa edição do Capital Insights, uma parceria do CNN Money com a Broadcast. Meu obrigado ao professor Christopher Pissarides e também a Carla Spotorno, editora do Broadcast. A gente se encontra numa próxima. Até mais.